he's been scaled back by the Lakers, but Eric, he's still putting up numbers. Lakers actually went into Chicago and got a win. Two teams, I guess, that really did want to win, both trying to figure out ways to lose to improve their draft stock. But as LeBron continues to put up numbers, I'll start off with this question for you. What does that mean at this point with LeBron putting up these numbers? Do you feel like they have any meaning? Is it just to help him get that much closer to chasing down, whether it be his rankings with scoring or assists and rebounds? What is he trying to do? Because there's no Ingram on this team. He's out with the whole blood clot situation. Kuzma's been hurt. It's not like he's building and playing with guys that are probably going to be on the roster next year. So are the numbers LeBron putting up, do they really mean anything at this point?
I'm not sure if you're trying to bait me into a debate here or what, but honestly, I don't really see the issue with it because the numbers he's putting up are right in line with his career averages. So in other words, what I'm saying is he's just playing basketball. Whether the Lakers were still in it or whether they're out of it, I think is somewhat irrelevant to the numbers he's putting up because now if he were going out and saying, okay, I'm going to do 50 points, 15 rebounds and 10 assists, I'm going to try to get these massive triple doubles. Yeah, then no, that doesn't mean anything to me because he's stat grabbing in the end of a season that's like garbage time in the NFL where it doesn't mean anything. But he's just out there balling like he has for his entire 15-year career. And the stat lines that he's putting up are not indifferent to what he's always done. And so I think they're just part of the picture. They're part of his cumulative stats story for his career. To me, it's kind of a non-story, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'll kind of bring it into my next point and kind of ties back into Russell Westbrook because I feel like with LeBron, regardless of what happens, when LeBron has these big stat lines, you know, LeBron has his people in the media that sort of protect him and they're LeBron guys. And then they can always revert back to the stats. No matter what the Lakers do now, no matter what the Cavs did or the Heat did, if LeBron had huge stat lines, it was always LeBron can't be the blame because he put up a triple-double. He put up a near triple-double in these games. He's not the problem on this team. It's everybody else around him. And then if they win, then LeBron got a lot of the glory for the win. And I was just kind of looking at stats over the last 3 years. So we talked about Westbrook for an example. And I know you feel like with him, his stats get overblown, and the same guys that are typically LeBron guys are not Westbrook guys. Your Shannon Sharps, Nick Wright, Colin Cowherd, etc. These guys all are on Russell Westbrook's back. He gets all the blame if they lose and no credit if they win. So I kind of went back through and looked at their last 3 years. Neither one of them have had a title since this point. You know, LeBron had his last one in the 2016 finals, so you've got 17, 18, and then this year. LeBron's won 61% of his games. Westbrook's won 58% of his games. LeBron's going 27, 8.7 assists, 8.6 rebounds. Westbrook's going 27 points, 10.4 assists, and 10.5 rebounds. But I feel like Westbrook's stats somehow are detrimental to him, and somehow LeBron's statistics continue to inflate him or continue to protect him. So I kind of wanted to get your take on that. Obviously, you're in the car a lot like myself, listen to a lot of these talking heads that come out there. But just the take of LeBron with his stats, when he puts them up, they seem to protect him. But when Westbrook does it, a guy who's going to average a triple-double now for 3 straight years, which seems unfathomable at this point in the NBA that have somebody do that since it's never been done before. But he seems like he's always sort of the bad guy, the villainous guy, that he's the guy that's known as a stat grabber and his teams aren't winning. But in fact, his win percentage isn't that much different than LeBron.
All right, Justin, I didn't know you were going to throw that one at me.
Told you it was going to be a good one.
So I sat there and objectively listened to you while you were giving me those stat lines. If I were being objective and just looking at that, I would say Russell Westbrook is the better of the two players. And I think probably he does get a little bit too much hate based on guys who are LeBron guys and sort of protecting the legacy. The same way that I would say LeBron, you know, is not really protected with the great things that he does from, let's say, Kobe guys or Jordan guys, because they feel like they can never really acknowledge the good things he does because it might move him a little bit closer to the greatest of all time talk. And well, we can't give in to that. It's, I was telling my buddy this week, it's kind of like the Democrats and Trump, right? We can never let Trump know if he ever does anything right, because that would destroy the whole narrative that we think he's Hitler. And I think it's the same thing with LeBron, where like MJ guys are never going to say that LeBron
is Hitler
does anything good or right, because then they might be giving in. They might be giving a little something, and it might move him a little bit closer. And so LeBron guys are certainly that way. Probably even about Durant, right? About Durant and Westbrook. to some degree Harden, although I think Harden still needs to do it for more years and have it mean something. But my whole argument was really 2 or 3 years ago when Westbrook won the MVP in a year that I felt like he was stat grabbing. Now that he's done it for multiple years and he seems to be still the same great player with a Paul George and still kind of doing his thing, I feel a little bit more justified in thinking that he's a good player. He's a very, very good player. And so his lines don't really bother me. But the thing that does kind of bother me is whether it's Westbrook or LeBron or anybody, I actually don't give in to that whole thing about, well, if LeBron's stat line is basically 27, 8, and 8, and the team wins, he's a great player. Or if he's 27, 8, and 8, and they lose, and the blame is on somebody else, I think that's overblown because you can't blame LeBron if they lose when he's 27, 8, and 8. And necessarily, I mean, you can maybe blame him in anecdotal moments. Maybe he played bad defense during a stretch, or maybe he didn't, make some of the easy layups, or maybe his foul shooting was 40% or something like that. I mean, I think you can always break down games and analyze certain things, but it has never stood to reason with me that LeBron gets so much hate when he goes 27, 8, and 8 in losses, and people have a big issue with that. Whereas if he does that and they win, he's great. He's just doing his thing, right? He's just his average. He's meeting his averages all the time. So I don't think that it equates to automatic wins, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's been true of Westbrook because he's been this great player averaging triple doubles the last 3 years. That doesn't equate to him automatically being an NBA champion the last 3 years, but that doesn't make him a bad player.
But have you seen it and you feel like they do get covered differently for sort of the same type of player when it comes to like on the court being able to fill up a stat sheet?
Oh, I mean, I'm going to give into that. Yeah, absolutely. Because LeBron is covered differently than anybody. I would agree with that. And we've talked about the fact that ESPN is just so far in his shorts that it's a bit ridiculous. I mean, even as a LeBron homer, a guy that absolutely will sit here and claim till the day he retires that he's my favorite player of all time, it still drives me nuts how much ESPN caters to him in everything, because I think it feeds the hate against him. I think it feeds this narrative that, LeBron, everything is always about him. I don't even think LeBron has much to do with some of the hate and admiration that he gets, one side of the coin or the other. It's the media. It's how they drive that narrative. LeBron's just out there playing basketball. And that's my point. If he goes 27, 8, and 8 for a career average, and he does that through wins or losses, it is what it is. I mean, the narrative is going to be then what the media makes of it, I guess is my point. So yeah, they get covered differently, and certainly they're more harsh on guys like Durant and Westbrook than they are on LeBron. And it's just the cycle of how it goes. I mean, my memory's not good enough to know what that cycle was like back in the Jordan days, but I mean, guys like Jordan and Kobe, they really could do no wrong in the media's eyes as well.
I just felt like just listening to guys talk about it and looking at, and look, Russ doesn't do himself any favors because he still takes about 5 to 7 horrible shots a game, which always come back to haunt him if they lose. But just this narrative that has kind of been set up where it feels like LeBron's going to put up big stat lines no matter who he's playing with, who they're playing. He's just a guy that can go out and get close to a near triple-double and have close to 30 points anytime he wants to, because now he's shooting nearly 6 threes a game. And the rest of his shots feel like they're just coming in the paint. It feels like he's sort of scrapped the mid-range game, and it's either paint points or threes for LeBron, or to the free throw line where he may shoot 60% or he may shoot 40%. You never really know with LeBron on the free throw line at this point. But just the narrative of the guys that want to protect LeBron are the same guys that will turn around 2 segments later in their own shows and attack Westbrook for the opposite reasons. Well, how can you put LeBron? How can you put a loss on LeBron when he went out and he did this? And then Russ will even have a better stat line, and they'll be like, well, Russ is the reason that this team loses. And if they win, well, it's Paul George. He's the whole reason that they're winning now. And I felt like when we're talking about Russ, he kind of gets this villain type coverage from guys. And it's all these national guys, but it's a lot of times it's the same guys that are covering LeBron and praising him and sort of protecting him because, well, what more can he do? And it feels like, well, what more do you want Westbrook to do when he's got 25 points and 14 rebounds and 16 assists and somehow they lose? Unless he's taking 40 shots in that game, which he's not done as much this year, how can you blame him? And before, when he didn't have Paul George, who else would you want taking the shots? So it just felt like more of the hypocrisy and the blasphemy that comes out of the media, where they just talk out both sides of their mouth and they just protect the guys that they like and they try to throw the guys that they don't like under the bus, but they don't even seem like they make any sense with their own takes within their own shows.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It's media bias at its best. I mean, it's, again, politically, it's like the difference between watching Fox News and CNN. You can see the same story from two completely different angles based on how the journalists' media bias is on that particular issue. And so I think you're still seeing the same thing out of sports. That's why ESPN's ratings are down so much, quite frankly. That's why they've had such political strife and, some anchors that get people all riled up. It's because they always take the position in the defense over one person or one thing or one team. And it's subjective journalism rather than objective journalism. So I tend to agree with you on that. My whole thing with Westbrook was, like I said, really 3 years ago, where I felt like he was somewhat stat grabbing because, I know he didn't have a lot around him 3 years ago, but it almost felt like to me, and maybe I'll end this segment with this question for you, Justin, because it felt like to me that Russell Westbrook's goal was to get a triple double. And that was, more than organics. This year, I feel like it's more organic because he's playing with Paul George and better players. And I feel like he's just playing hard. And I really respect that. 2 to 3 years ago, his shooting percentages were not as good as they are now. And I felt like his goal was to get a triple double all the time. And then they get to the NBA playoffs and they don't do well. And so to me, that's where I kind of had an issue with Russell Westbrook winning the MVP a couple years back. And I just felt like it didn't translate to actually anything positive for the team. But I see what you're saying. It's how it's covered. So here's my thing. If LeBron had ever wanted to focus on a career average of triple double, don't you feel like he could have done that?
It seems like he could have done that. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because of who he played with in Miami. He really couldn't do it at that point, or he didn't have the ball enough, or he wasn't the same facilitator. They always had a point guard in Chalmers or Cole that sort of facilitated some of the offense, and they would get LeBron involved, where when he kind of went to Cleveland, then he sort of took over more running the offense and then playing off of Kyrie, getting him more involved. And so it felt like as he's gotten later in his career, he's sort of taken on more of that point forward role where he's getting more of the assists with more regularity. And the fact that you do see a lot of times where if there's a defensive shot that goes up, everybody else clears out and it's just LeBron getting an easy rebound and then just pushing the tempo, where that's sort of by design, where we saw the same thing with Westbrook. And you're starting to see that more, where I understand your point with Russ 3 years ago, but I think that can be said about every single player in this league that gets a triple-double. I think every single one of them know when they're close, because all you have to do is watch a game and watch how many times during meaningless things they're looking up. And they're looking up because the stat board's right above their head. At an NBA game, it shows every single statistic from rebounds, assists, points. They know all that stuff, where they stand all the time. And there's guys on the bench that constantly have updated stat sheets that are letting them know what they're doing. I mean, there's a reason why LeBron threw his hands up, because he knew exactly when he passed Jordan that he did it, because those guys know exactly where they stand with how many points they've scored. And it's not just LeBron. Just watch an NBA game.
Well, yeah, that's a different,
but I'm saying
kind of moment. You see that in the NFL with a guy catching a ball or getting a certain yardage. LeBron's a student of the game too. He knew for probably weeks how he stood in that whole thing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I think it furthers the point that these guys all know their statistics. And when they get close to a triple-double, all they have to do is look up at the board and know, okay, I need 2 more assists. And they're going to try to get guys 2 assists to get that triple-double. If they need 1 rebound, you're going to see them go harder for that rebound. So, yeah, I don't know why LeBron...
But that's my point of why I feel like LeBron, if he wanted to, I see what you're saying about, Chalmers and Cole and guys that played around him. I'm saying if he came into the NBA and said, I'm going to be a guy who averages a triple-double for my career, I feel like he has the body and the play style where he could have done that. And he didn't. He didn't do that. He got it organically, at least for the most part. Whereas Westbrook, I felt like that became his identity. Whereas LeBron was more of a Magic Johnson, where he could just distribute. He was big, so he rebounded, and then he could score. And I feel like, though, he could have said, oh, I'm going to just get 2 more rebounds and 2 more assists per game. And he absolutely could have done that.
Yeah, I think Russ really made the triple double like a sexy stat that you wanted to get. It seems like guys would like, okay, yeah, guys will, the old Sports Center thing was mess around and get a triple double. Guys weren't just doing it. It didn't seem like people like, okay, I'll try to get one tonight. But then, like, I think when Russ was like, okay, I'm going to go out and get one every single night, then you've really seen LeBron over the course of the last 3 years really pick it up. We talked about how